Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronika Sonsev. I'm one of the co-founders of CommerceNext, a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and direct-to-consumer brands. This is the 20th webinar in our webinar series that we started from the beginning of this pandemic. And on behalf of my co-founders, Scott Silverman and Alan Dick, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. We have a really timely and important topic that we're going to cover today: e-commerce strategies to tackle holiday shipping challenges. There's a lot of info and I'm excited to share it with you. And I want to thank you for tuning in live. And for those that watch later, I want to thank you for watching the replay. This is a live webinar and we are trying something new, so bear with us in case we have a couple hiccups. But we want to make this as interactive as possible. And to that effect, we want to make sure we get your questions. I'm going to show you how to load your questions into the system in just a minute. But make sure to ask the questions during the polls. We'll be reviewing them, and we'll make sure to ask the panelists during the Q&A. We're also going to be asking you questions via live polls, so be ready for that. And now I'm just going to turn to my slides for a few important thank yous. I want to start off by thanking our speakers: Emily Culp, CEO of CoverFX; Ken Cassar, Principal at CassarCo Strategy and Analytics Consultants; Matt Crawford, GM of Shipping at BigCommerce; Scott Lux, former VP of E-commerce and Digital at Theory and Helmut; and Jeff Gerstel, CMO of B&H Photo Video. I also want to thank our sponsor and webinar partner, BigCommerce. When we brought up shipping as a topic for this webinar, BigCommerce really stepped up to the plate and came up with some really great ideas for, to share with you about how we can improve the shipping for this holiday season. I also want to thank our gifting partner, Loop Commerce. All of our speakers will receive a gift through Loop's Gift Now platform, but also 5 attendees, 5 people who are watching live, will receive a gift as well. Sorry for those who are watching this in replay. Now, I want to walk through the agenda for today. I'm going to quickly review upcoming events. Then we'll go through housekeeping notes, and then Ken Cassar will take over and talk about share the merchant and consumer research. Then Matt Crawford will talk about future-proofing shipping and fulfillment. We'll do a few polls and then jump into the panel discussion. So the next event that we have coming up is the CommerceNext Holiday Summit. It's on October 7th from 1 to 4:30 p.m. And it's really going to help you make the most of a digital-first holiday season. You can sign up on our website or just follow this link, bit.ly/cnholiday, to hear from retailers from Land's End, Bombas, Foot Locker, Stella & Dot, Route 21, Beta Brand, and many more. Now, for those of you that are new, don't worry if you miss anything. We are recording. This will be live tomorrow. So I'm just going to take a moment to show you where things are on the screen, and then we'll get started. So first of all, if you have any questions, there's a QA panel on the right of your screen. You can enter your questions by typing them into the bottom, and then we will publish those questions. And if you see a question that you're interested in, then you want to upvote that question. That will help us prioritize which questions to ask the speakers. We also have a few handouts that you're going to want to download during this webinar. We have the deck that we're presenting today, but we also have a report on the holiday shipping based on the consumer and merchant research that we collected. And BigCommerce also has a holiday guide that they included here as well. So you'll want to make sure to download those. And then if you're watching on replay, that you can download the handouts on the bottom of your player. So with that, I want to turn it over to Ken Cassar. Ken is principal of CassarCo Strategy and Analytic Consultants. He is the one who conducted the research, both the merchant and consumer research, and is going to talk about his findings. Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Veronika. And I am just hanging around my home office with a tweed coat on, as I typically do in the midst of pandemics out here in Connecticut. So today We're going to present research that hopefully is timely, interesting for you about the upcoming holiday season. There are 2 surveys that we ran, both in early to mid-September. The first is a merchant survey where we had 63 respondents who answered a series of questions about their expectations for the holiday season with a focus on shipping. And I'm sorry, in terms of the composition of those retailers, you can see on the left-hand side the type of retailers that they are, on the right-hand side the size of those retailers. And we also partnered up again with BizRate Insights in order to conduct a consumer survey of 1,022 consumers during the first week of September. As you can see, from an age perspective, it's largely representative of the overall US pop, and we skew a little bit female here, but that's probably okay given that we're talking about holiday. But before we talk about holiday, we want to do a quick pulse check on the state of the American consumer. So this is data from the US Census Bureau, where we look at monthly consumer spending on retail plus restaurant together. And as you can see, before the pandemic, we're plowing along happily enough, beating last year pretty comfortably. April and May were pretty terrible. June and July were actually above the previous year as we saw some pent up demand. And then in August, we see sales basically revert to August 2019 levels. A little bit too early to say whether that's a hiccup or whether that's a result of some of the stimulus programs kind of winding down. Another important measure of consumer confidence is consumer confidence. Here we're tracking it over the course of time. And as we can see, when the pandemic started, we saw a historically large drop in just one period in consumer confidence of 30 points. It's come up a little bit. If you're looking for good news in this data, I suppose that it's good news that consumer confidence is higher than it was during the bulk of the Great Recession. Unemployment is sort of the last big macroeconomic number that we want to look at. At last count, unemployment was 8.4%, down from 15% at the peak. So we're certainly moving in the right direction. And the level now is actually a little bit lower than the peak of the Great Recession. So again, glass is half full. In some respects anyway, it's better than it was 10 or so years ago. Moving into our consumer survey data, one of the drivers of holiday spending obviously are visits with loved ones. When we ask consumers in our consumer survey about their plans for the holiday season, 47% said that they intend to see fewer people this year than they had last and in years past. And obviously that's a fairly important driver of gift giving occasions. When we ask consumers about their plans to spend this holiday season, 41% say that they plan to spend less this year. Every year, I've been tracking this data for 20 something years, and every year we see a cohort of consumers that intend to spend less, and reality tends to get a hold of them. They wind up spending more than they'd intended, but at least out of the gate, consumers intend to curtail spending a bit, and this is bad news for retailers, unless those retailers happen to be online retailers. When we ask consumers what they expect that they'll do differently this year compared with past years, the number one response is that they plan to do more of their shopping online. So for online retailers, it's a combination of largely good news with a bit of pressure that's going to come along with that demand. So if we were to look back to April and May, I think that we as consumers and we as merchants were sort of feeling this way, a little bit upside down, feeling a little bit of free fall. And I think we're all hoping that by this time of the year, we might have been having fun and on the kiddie roller coaster. But the reality is that we are not yet on the kiddie roller coaster while we are not in the free fall that we had been before. So The first piece of data that we want to present today are some benchmarking metrics that we think are going to be interesting for retailers in order to kind of compare their own plans for holiday with what others like them are thinking. And if you, when we're on the topic of shipping, if you are thinking about your plans for this year, there are really four big questions that retailers need to be thinking about. One, should they offer free shipping as a promotion? Two, if so, what the minimum thresholds should be? Three, if so, how quickly should they deliver? What is their standard non-expedited promise to consumers? And then finally, what is the cutoff before Christmas? What is the last day before Christmas that they will send products in an unexpedited manner? Taking the first question first, in our merchant survey, I think this is the first merchant survey data point, 92% of the merchants that we surveyed said that they do indeed plan to offer free shipping promotions this holiday season. This is consistent, certainly, with what we've seen in the past. But then layering on that, when we asked merchants when they or what the minimum order sizes were this year relative to past years, 68% said that they intend to run with the same minimum order thresholds as in years past. 11% intend to drop their minimum thresholds. 13% are inclined to increase their minimum thresholds. So, I think blur your eyes a little bit. Status quo is probably the story here. Among those retailers that have concrete plans, by the way, 19% of the merchants that we surveyed don't yet have the answer to this question. But when we asked about how quickly their non-expedited standard delivery will be, we found that 63% plan on delivering in 4 or more days. We do see 22% that intend to deliver in 2 or fewer days, but it seems that at least among this particular group of merchants, there isn't a plan to try to keep up with folks like Amazon and the delivery promises that they're making. And then the last kind of big benchmarking question that we have is around the cutoff prior to Christmas. And what we found here is 77% of retailers intend to cut shipping off before Christmas between December 14th and 21st. We have a few that are willing to push it to after December 21st, and a few that are playing it very, very safe, cutting it off before December 13th. That's Maisie, by the way. But again, this is another one of those data points that has kind of the feeling of status quo relative to what we've seen in the past. The other data point I want to share that's kind of an interesting one and is a trend that we've seen over the past few years is store-based fulfillment. So for retailers that have stores, we asked whether they intend to ship from those stores, and 41% said that they plan to ship significantly more orders from their stores this year. So that's a new dimension that has the potential to relieve some pressure on fulfillment centers, but will likely create some new challenges in stores and for e-commerce operations during the year. Next, we're going to sort of transition from benchmarks to pain points, retailer pain points. When we asked retailers, and we asked them 2 different questions about pain points. The first was about consumer-related pain points. The second was about fulfillment-related pain points. On the consumer side, the biggest thing that you all collectively are worried about is the combination of the consumer expectation of fast, free delivery with the reality of the shipper surcharges that we know are likely, or that we know definitively are going to be in play again this year. It's interesting that is such a dominant fear, more than things that I would have expected would have been higher on the list, like the fact that Prime Day is going to fall in October, like the fact that we may see shifts or continued shifts of spending from discretionary into essential. So I think that this as a potential risk factor really stands out in the minds of retailers this year. And when we go back to the consumer data and we ask consumers about the promotions that appeal to them, we find that free shipping indeed is the promotion that will resonate most effectively this year. In addition, of course, to their desire to have great prices on the products that they're buying, followed by expedited shipping at 26%. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. When we ask consumers about their biggest concerns this holiday season, we can see the lingering effects of COVID in what consumers are worried about. They worry that items will be out of stock. They worry that packages won't arrive on time. They, I think in an unfounded way, worry about high shipping and handling charges. Again, the free shipping, again, shows that it's highly important to consumers. One of the kind of bad news pieces that I have for everybody here is that when we ask consumers about when they plan to do their holiday shopping, most 67%, 66% say that they plan to do it roughly around the same time as last year. 34% say that they plan to do their shopping earlier this year. I'm a little dubious on that. Again, having tracked consumer survey data around holidays for kind of a long time, I think that consumers' best intentions are often not realized on this. And my gut is telling me from seeing this data that the timing of consumer purchasing, unless you're able to effectively manipulate it this year, it's probably going to be consistent with what we've seen in years past. Back to the merchant concerns. The logistics related concerns that merchants have, both come back to concerns around third-party shippers. Number one, they worry that they may have capped deliveries during peak demand. Number two, they worry about the impact of surcharges on profitability. So we know that these shipper-related issues are high on the list of merchants. The other, and we didn't explicitly ask about concerns about the election and related issues, but in our other please specify responses in a few different questions, we did pick up some unprovoked anxiety about the election. Some people worry that the mail system may be clogged up because of ballots. Other people worry about chaos and such. So there's a little bit of that. I wouldn't say that it's highly widespread, but there was enough that it warranted mentioning. And then finally, being the optimist that we are, we want to close with some positive news, exploitable opportunities during holiday 2020. And to do that, I want to start off by coming back to the consumer survey question we had looked at before. And what's interesting here, I mean, the way we structured the question was that we separated free shipping from expedited shipping. And it allowed us to kind of understand the relative importance of those two things. And what we find is that consumers find free shipping 3 times more important than fast shipping. And I think that opens up doors for retailers to be able to slow things down. Now, this isn't, of course, true for all retailers, but it does show represent an opportunity that I think is an important one for some merchants. And the last data slide, and possibly the most important one, is a question where we explain to consumers in our consumer survey that it's going to cost more money for retailers to send packages this year. And we asked which of the following trade-offs they might be willing to make in order to get free shipping. First of all, we found that 31% of consumers said that they'd be willing to wait a little bit longer, sort of underscoring the point we were just making. The other point for those with brick and mortar stores, especially those with a lot of brick and mortar stores, is that 37% of consumers said that they that they'd be willing to pick up orders in local stores. New behavior that we saw an acceleration of during COVID that consumers seem content enough with. And so just some final recommendations before I hand the baton back to Veronika. First, free shipping is table stakes, but you've got delivery around delivery speed. In-store shopping is going to be less prevalent, but curbside and the demands that curbside places on stores are going to be intense. Training, cross-training of employees starting now, making sure that everybody is ready is going to be critical for those trying to do that. The willingness of consumers to use curbside is something retailers ought to take advantage of if they have stores. And then the last point that I make, that I've been making for the past 5 or 6 months, is that the scrappy mentality that retailers have shown during COVID has been admirable, important. It's saved a lot of retailers, and we think that when COVID's over, and it will be over someday, when COVID's over, that scrappy mentality is something we think merchants really ought to try to continue forward. So I am going to stop sharing.
Awesome, Ken. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And Veronika, I'll let you take control again.
Yes, Ken, thank you so much. There's a lot of great insights. And just to remind everyone before I introduce Matt, is that there's a report, there's both the slides that Ken presented, as well as the report with the full write-up of the analysis available for download with this webinar. So you can dig into the data and learn more about what the implications for your business. And now I'd like to introduce Matt Crawford, who's the GM of shipping at BigCommerce. He's going to kind of pick up the baton from where Ken left off and talk about how you can future-proof your business for shipping and fulfillment this holiday season. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Veronika. Ken, good job. What's interesting to me as I thought through the findings is how much resonates, your data and the experience we're hearing from merchants directly. I look after all of shipping here at BigCommerce. For those that don't know us, we power e-com for about 60,000 brands around the world. We've got some merchants on the phone that work with us. We have partners that work with us as well. So I'm going to share a handful of, things to think about as you prepare for the holiday season. I'm going to categorize it all under future proofing, right? Because a lot of what I'm going to talk about isn't really directly applicable to the holiday. I think we should be putting these things in place, and we should be continuing them going into next year. So first, planning for the holiday season. When I think about this, when I step back to similar to what Ken said, 6 months ago, before COVID hit, for all of you on the phone, most of you saw record volumes. You didn't know how your family was going to be safe, how your workers were going to be safe. You didn't know what was happening to the economy or consumer demand, and y'all made it through it. And that was in a time of a lot of unknowns. And we came out ahead. And I think coming into this holiday period, there's still a lot of unknowns. There's things that we can't control, like carrier capacity. There's things we can't control, like surcharges, but there's a lot we can't control. So mine's going to be half a dozen points or so on what you can control and how you plan for that, and how we, how do you go forward, and how to make shipping and fulfillment a good part of your business. So first, I think about shipping as, are you selling into the right markets, right? I'm still astonished by how many merchants still sell US only, or US and Canada. So my first question is, are you merchandising your products in a way that delivers the right local experience, both within the US and outside? Most e-com platforms make it super easy to show fully landed cost of checkout from a shipping perspective, the right taxes and duties, promotions, or even a full-on merchandising experience. And I think there's still time to enhance your site if it doesn't do that today before the holiday period. Second, as I talk about controlling what you can't control, I'd say start having conversations with your partners, if you aren't already, about how they're managing the peak period. When I say partners, it could be app partners that are connected to your e-com. It could be your warehouses, your fulfillment centers, your 3PLs, the carriers, or any suppliers, right? And I think things to talk about what are lead times, what are blackout periods, surcharges, what happens if there's COVID disruption from a people perspective, and how do I escalate if things aren't working? And then there will be things that don't work as planned, and plan for those disruptions and come up with contingency plans where possible, right? And that could be as simple as talking to your team, internal processes, or even alternative suppliers in the event that one of your suppliers has major issues. So the next point I'm thinking of, in your e-com site, how do you communicate holiday, your expectations for how you want your shoppers to engage with you in your checkout? So I'd say first, make sure the policies and timelines are very clear. And broadly speaking, you want to provide merchants with choice. In the checkout, things like cutoff dates, showing clear transit times, how long it's going to take for a product to get delivered, what are your return policies, and inventory availability are all easy things that we can control that shoppers will be expecting during the holiday period. As far as shipping choices go in your checkout, we talked about how important free shipping is. I still think one of the best strategies now is increasing AOV, or increasing your free shipping threshold leading up to the holiday, as it's going to be a little bit more expensive to do delivery. But balancing what's let's just call it an economy speed that you can continue to offer for free perhaps, and then offering expedited options as well. Some merchants are increasing price a little bit to cover shipping surcharges, giving customers choice on what delivery dates they want to offer. We talked about buy online, pick up in store earlier, but I think also the carriers like a FedEx Hold at location give merchants an awesome other choice to give their customers at checkout. Let's assume now your shoppers have checked it out. I'm going to call the next one making sure your fulfillment strategy is right. Another one that's pretty mind-boggling to me is how many merchants still have all their eggs in one basket with one carrier. So if you're 100% with USPS and you're worried about the election creating capacity, whether that's going to happen or not, you don't have the capability to put volume to FedEx and drive more volume that way. So I'd say make sure your carrier contracts, and it could be carriers or fulfillment centers, the contracts allow you flexibility. You're using shipping platforms that allow you to multi-carrier source, and making sure your teams know how to make those decisions. Finally, and I think this is again, I think of my personal experience when I say, does the post-purchase experience deliver your brand promise? A super easy one, if for all of you that are brands today, go on your site, make a purchase, and think about, does that post-purchase experience make me want to come back? On Amazon, whether it's good or bad, it's predictable. Many e-com brands I buy from, especially smaller ones, the experience isn't predictable, and it's not something that makes me want to come back. It's not something that gets me excited. And then I think about the other side where a brand gives me a box that's super exciting to open, right? It reflects the same experience I saw on the shopping site. Sometimes I get a small bag of gummy bears or something, in terms of it could be candy, or it could be a promotion or a coupon that says, hey, come back, or something as easy as, hey, give me feedback. And then make it easy for the shopper to return the products if it makes sense as well. And I also think the post-purchase engagement, whether it be via text, there's apps that make it easy to do, or even email, but think about ways to continue the shopper experience where you're engaging with the merchant on your site after the order is placed. I think all three of those I referenced on this slide are things that we all can do right now. There's plenty of time to put in place before the holiday season, and all of them should be not only good for the holiday today, but also making sure that you're set up to succeed going forward.
Awesome. Matt, thank you for the great advice, as always. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our webinars, it's instant poll time. So just a reminder, if you're on BigMarker, you can find the results of the polls by going to polls closed, and that's in the right-hand panel. And for those watching the replay, we'll have a download of them in the player on the bottom. So our first poll: how concerned are you about the impending shipping crisis this holiday? So we've been talking about it. How concerned are you? Very concerned, slightly worried, or not concerned at all? The majority of you are very concerned. Some are slightly worried. 56% are very concerned. Some are slightly worried. And there's 4% of you who are cool, calm, and collected and not concerned at all. Congratulations to you. But, obviously that's a little bit self-serving, because if you're on a webinar on shipping, you probably care a lot about this issue. Our next question, we're going to launch the poll. Do you have plans to address the shipping crunch? Options being yes, definitely; no, but working on it; no, there's not much we can do. Kind of resolve to not be able to solve it. It looks like the majority of you do have plans, and the ones who don't are working on it. There's a few who believe that there's not much that they can do, but it seems like the majority of folks are either have a plan or they're working on it right now. So we're going to close this out and go to the next question. When do you plan to start your holiday marketing? Option A, it's already started. Option B, early October. C, mid-October. D, early November. Or E, Cyber Week, for those of you who are late starters. So go ahead and answer that question. All right. Well, it looks like about the largest percentage is mid-October, but there's about 18% of folks who have already started and 24% of folks are starting in early October. So basically by October, the majority of you will have your holiday marketing going. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to close that out. Go to the next one. And our last question, and this is relating to our webinar on the 14th on gifting. How does your company view e-commerce gifting? A strategic priority, tactical secondary priority. We're just starting to develop our gifting program. We know it's important, but we haven't addressed it. We don't recognize it as a priority for our business. So interestingly, the majority of you view it as a strategic priority, which is really great. And then some consider it a secondary priority, but it seems like the majority believe it's a strategic priority. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. And move on to the polls. I'm going to stop sharing and have the panelists turn on their mics and join me on the virtual stage. All right. Hi, everyone. How are you? Emily, you're muted. Making sure everyone can.
I'm ready.
All right. We're all here. Great. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of data. A lot of stuff is happening with respect to shipping. I want to start off by having you guys each introduce yourselves and your role in your respective companies, and then we'll kind of jump right into the discussion and talk about what folks can do about these impending shipping challenges. Emily, you want to start?
Sure. This is, by the way, the awkward part of Zoom because there's no linear way to figure this out. I'm Emily Culp, CEO of CoverFX, and thrilled to be here. I pick Matt. I'm throwing it to Matt now.
Matt's muted. Okay, great. He's unmuted. Go.
Hey guys, so I look after all shipping related partnerships at BigCommerce. And like I said, we power e-com for a bunch of folks on this call today. We partner with a number of folks on the call today. And I talk to merchants all day about shipping.
Awesome. Jeff, you can go next. I'll direct.
Okay, Jeff Gerstel. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at B&H Photo here in New York.
Scott, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Scott Lux, and as of about 2 weeks ago, I led e-commerce and digital for Helmut Lang & Theory, and I'm currently an adjunct professor up at Columbia and with FIT in New York.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you guys here. Obviously, this is a big issue. You saw from the polls that a lot of people were super worried about shipping and what's happening. Just for context, we all know that most e-commerce sites, including Amazon, had a shipping crunch during the beginning of COVID-19. So now we're layering on holiday demand. You can foresee these challenges being amplified. I guess, Emily, I'm going to start with you. Are you worried about this shipping crunch?
I'm an optimist realist, so I'm not going to say I'm worried because I don't see worry as something that's productive. Will I say that I am heavily thinking about it? Yes. I think there are a few elements. For me, one of them is really what's important to us at CoverFX, and I should have mentioned we make vegan, cruelty-free beauty products for everyone. What's important for me and what keeps me up a bit at night is making sure that we're doing everything we humanly can to manage consumer expectations. And I think as Matt and other folks already said today, we all know what it's like to be a consumer. This is a chaotic time. So even if we have in bold underlying fonts on our website, you see it in emails, Instagram, it's, on your mobile experience, you must place an order by this day or you won't get it, especially around holiday. We don't want to disappoint anyone. And I think one of the things we all discussed in a pre-call, which I thought was very true, is I think about the days pre-COVID where Amazon Prime, it showed up. It really showed up within like 24 hours, at least for me. Now you order on Prime and I'm thrilled and almost delighted in a 2 to 3 week window to get my product. So I will say, I think consumer expectations have shifted. The caveat I would make is it's very different when you're waiting for a product, for personal use versus gift giving. that is fixed to a specific day, that's a very real thing that you don't want to disappoint people on. So consumer expectations, I would say the other piece for us, good or bad, is because our business has been growing exponentially on coverfx.com. I do feel like we've been in perpetual holiday mode. I think the caveat on that is you can only contingency plan for everything you can think about, but there's always something else out there. So I think the good news is we've worked a lot of different scenarios out, but recognize we don't have the crystal ball for everything. So again, I think it's about being transparent with the consumer and making sure they understand what options we're giving them.
Okay, so and it's a perfect transition to kind of my follow on, which is how are you mitigating those issues? Because Catherine Brody in chat put share your shipping crunch solutions with us. So part of it is just communicating with customers and making sure they know when the deadlines are and making sure they're really clear. Anything else you want to add to that, Emily?
Yeah, I think, well, there's that. I mean, let's be honest, this year we're going to have to pull up our last shipping window by almost a week, which just it seems foreign to me, and it's going to be foreign to consumers. So yes, we're doing all of that. I think the other piece is make sure that you have a very strong handle on your operations. And what I mean by that is, again, going back to like, what are the contingency plans for staffing in your warehouse, whether it's an own warehouse or a 3PL, literally getting down to that level so you have clear line of sight when there might be challenges that you have to resolve. And then I think I go back to like classic human behavior. Have solid relationships with some of your key shippers. Make sure that they know you by name, they know your team by multiple different levels, and that you're touching base with them and that you truly understand what they're facing as a business, like full transparency. So then should something arise, you also have a contingent partner, and understand that all methods of delivery aren't the same. Saying that all land is going to be the same and all air is going to be the same, or ocean, not even remotely like the truth. You have to go down to the individual partner or company that's delivering. So making sure that you and your team have those relationships and also have an escalation process on both sides.
Awesome. Great advice.
Anyone else like this? That would be the last thing.
Fingers crossed works. It works.
Yeah.
Hey, Emily, quick one. So when you're saying you're going to pull forward your shipping window by a week, are you still going to offer, an overnight all the way up to kind of the deadline? Or are you thinking of, December 15th or so as your cutoff and it is what it is?
Probably.
Because I think that's a fun one to think about, is that it's not necessarily the entire cutoff goes away, but it's almost your free shipping threshold. Your free shipping cutoff is earlier, but there's still probably a chance where maybe it's just at a higher price point to still sell all the way through the holiday season.
We're still looking at all these different scenarios, but it goes back to because we have gone through this pre-holiday where even if somebody is willing to pay the upcharge on whatever carrier that could deliver in 2-day window, there's still a lot of problems with that. And especially knowing around going back to holiday, someone pays that incremental amount, doesn't get the gift in time. Now we have an upset consumer. We're dealing with a whole bunch of other charges that we may or may not want to waive or not. It just doesn't make for a great experience. So we'd prefer, as I said, we're still working through it, but we'd prefer to have a happy consumer or help steer them in the direction where we can ensure they get the physical product in a timely manner.
Makes sense.
Jeff, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, yes. I sort of think that, look, we're all going to have shipping challenges. It's kind of a fact. I don't know if they'll be better or worse or not as bad as we expect. We're going to try our best to communicate, under promise. But I almost think the frame we should be using is, if we're going to look a year from now at what we did, what actions do we take to absolutely satisfy our customers? So what we're seeing is when we try a little too hard and take a few too many chances, we're disappointing people. If we kind of pull back on what we're doing and say, look, let's take 90% of our orders and do an amazing job, and the 10% that we're not so sure we can do a good job on, let's not take that order. Let someone else fail. And those customers that we're going to ship to, we want them to believe we're going to ship, have trust that what we're promising them, and at the end of the day, meet or exceed their expectations. So I think the interesting thing, I think about my whole career, it's like, how do you maximize sales, responsibly, not do stupid things, but how do you grow your business as much as possible? This season may be one of those, maybe don't pursue everything, but pursue the things you can do really well. And
Yeah.
I think that'll grow the brand. And a year from now, we'll have a group of loyal customers who would say, everyone else lied to me. They didn't have my product. They disappointed me. Blah 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 blah. These guys actually did what they said and delivered. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and the frame I'm using going into the next few months.
Taking the long-term view on customer loyalty and really being honest about what you can deliver versus like taking the dollars and not being sure. Rob Schmaltz actually had a good question. So I'm going to interject here with his question. He asked, what are your thoughts about offering shipping deals, kind of given that shipping prices are higher than ever in this market, especially given the importance of, profits matter as well as winning market share. So are you guys considering offering shipping deals? Are you standing course, passing costs on?
We, at CoverFX, we are not passing on the cost. We feel like consumers have enough different challenges in the universe right now. It's not their issue that the shipping situation is what it is right now. So we would not pass on the cost to them. In terms of, so we aren't doing them. Shipping deals, I guess it depends how you define a deal. Are we going to expand our free shipping timeframe? Yes, we're going to pull that up to basically accommodate or work around what we have to pull forward on the last shipping date.
Anyone else? Any thoughts? Scott, anything you guys were doing at Theory or Helmut Lang?
Yeah, I would go, one thing I want to go back to the conversation previously. So I'll answer the shipping deals. I would say, same thing Emily was saying, we're not offering anything different or unique. Kind of what Matt's saying, we'll hold. I think Theory, Helmut Lang, some of the other brands I've led ecom for, Intermix or John Barbados in the past, weren't as much of a gifting brand. So we still would see that rush towards the end, but not so much on the gifting side. Now, one of the things and one of the key learnings we saw during COVID was being able to activate our store associates. And I think that was probably one of the key learnings. I think going back to what we were talking about, one of the contingency plans we're looking to activate is how do we leverage our fleet of physical stores? So we were a little bit hesitant. I think a lot of people were at the very beginning. Okay, how much outreach do we do? Is it okay to communicate? Do we do sales? Do we not? But what we found when our store associates actually contacted customers that they had a working relationship with, a lot of times it's just to check in and see how you were doing. They were thrilled to hear from the associate, had that conversation. And as the weeks progressed, we started to put together our edit and styling suggestions. We would send them curated boxes, if you will. And we started to be able to leverage, we don't have an automated ship from store, but we did leverage that as a backup. And so we'll continue to use that as our contingency. One, if we do see some slowness in that last mile delivery, then we can leverage our fleet of stores to look and see, can we get that package there faster? Can we messenger it, activate some of those components? And then two, being able to be a little bit more proactive on logically, where do we fulfill from? Our warehouse and 3PL is in New Jersey. A vast majority, as you can imagine with our brand, is in major markets, typically clustered around the East Coast. And then you have LA, Miami, and Chicago as kind of the other targets. Now that's where it gets a little bit tricky, but we put in plans with our West Coast stores to make sure we can look, if we see an order, I think Jeff had mentioned, to be a little more proactive, to flag it and say, okay, we know it may not get there in time, but we can leverage our stores, and then leverage the outreach of the associates to be proactive if we see a delay or we get notification from UPS that there are delays. So I think that's probably one of the bigger pieces we leveraged or learned. It's just that outreach and leveraging the physical location in a way that just became accelerated. I think it's the buzzword we've all heard throughout COVID.
So I'm going to summarize the recommendation that this team made before I go to the next questions. I think there's so many good nuggets here. One is, like, be really clear about what your cutoff dates are. Make sure you have backup carriers. Stores can be a backup, whether it's BOPIS or ship from store. And don't try to sell things that you're not sure you can deliver on. So better to kind of keep the customer happy than to sell something that may not get there in time. I think those are what a great start in terms of recommendations for the audience. I want to talk about the start of the holiday season. It was really amazing to see how many people are starting in October this year. It's crazy, and a number of retailers and e-commerce brands have already started. Amazon Prime Day is October 13th. I'm going to direct this question to Matt. Does this alter it does seem like it alters the timing of the holiday season, and how do customers adapt? How do brands adapt to this?
So I'll answer this in kind of two ways. One, if you can offer promotions to drive earlier sales, great, right? And there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing that. But I don't think that really fundamentally changes the holiday season. I just think of me personally, I can't think of all my holidays. I don't start thinking about holiday shopping until December. But I think if I go back to what you can control and what you can't control right now, for a brand that's not in 3PL locations throughout the country, you can't deliver an Amazon delivery experience at the price point they do, right? So my sense is control what you can control, given the infrastructure you have today, and put plans in place to try to address that going forward using 3PLs or distributed inventory. But I think, look, Amazon sets the bar high, and from a purely strategic perspective, what Amazon does impacts everyone. But from a day-to-day, if you're not already set up to do that, I wouldn't stress about what Amazon's doing. Control what you can control, do the best you can given the structure you have, and deliver, what we said earlier, deliver what you can and deliver the best experience you can. So that's my angle. Is there's so much pressure that brands put on themselves to compete with Amazon, and it's just not possible for most of the folks. So that's my view on it.
Yeah, and I would like to add one thing. I would disagree a little bit on the promotion side, because I think that's one of the challenges, especially for a contemporary brand like Theory, is when we hit COVID. And I think this is where it gets interesting, right? Because Amazon, depending on the product and the vertical you operate in, may view them as a threat or not. For us, I think it'll be interesting to see. This is probably I lose track how many times they try to go into luxury, but they just launched that recently. So I think that's where I'll keep my eye on. But for us, it's really trying to, how do we pivot back into that full price selling, right? Because we were promotional with, if you think of our channels, retail was shut down predominantly. Again, New York was slow to reopen. Our wholesale partners, Nordstrom, Saks, were shut down for a period of time. So to move through some of that inventory, we did have to go through a promotional period. Now with fall product, the weather finally changed. Peers I've talked to, we've seen some pickup in full price selling. And I think, Matt, that's where we're trying to maintain that side of it and get back to healthier margins, and see if we can hold that at least as long as possible till we get into the core holiday for us, which is typically in that November timeline. Now, where it gets interesting, everything we talked about in the great research we saw earlier is consumer receptiveness. And that's the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause, is we saw this before. Are they going to wait and know, okay, you were promotional for 4 or 5 months, it's going to happen again? Or is the product compelling enough, and is there a need for that type of product with consumer sentiment, still more people working from home? So I think that's where it gets really interesting with what Amazon's offering, what the consumers are actually wanting to buy, versus are there other components that they're willing to pay full price for, or perhaps do they continue to wait and when we get into that normal cadence?
I think if I could just add and build on that, I totally agree with you, Scott. One of the things we haven't talked about is inventory. And at least at CoverFX, we were not born as D2C and have a lot of wholesale. And when you have the Ultas of the world, they're phenomenal partners, but all of their stores opening, closing, just keeps happening due to COVID. It's a challenge to manage it, and hence the promotional activity is definitely something I think we all keep our eye on. For me, it comes down to, as you were starting to allude to as well, why does the consumer ever pay full price now? Let's just be honest. And I think a large part of that comes down to exclusivity and really thinking about merchandising and additional services around that. So for us, it's around having exclusive product in limited quantities So retraining, going back to your point, Scott, building on what you're saying, retraining that, okay, if you don't buy this now, you actually might miss the window. And that's fine, but understand that, and hoping for the 75% off or some of the ridiculous deals we've all seen, it's not going to actually happen. And that is going to be a journey for both sides, I would say.
So that's a great strategy for getting people to kind of pull up their shopping habits, is creating kind of limited edition offerings that will essentially sell out. So kind of forcing them to buy sooner, because
Probably encouraging. Yes.
encouraging them to buy sooner because they may not have it closer.
Well,
magically by December 15th, it'll be all out.
Well, we think of, I mean, one of the things I'm sure we all agree on is like, there is whether you call it share of wallet or what have you, people have started to attribute roughly, even if you're shopping in December, you are starting to get a sense of what you might spend maybe this holiday season, and are, starting to think through that. So we want to make sure that people see value and have something that's crave worthy and want to part with that dollar, if you will.
Yep, absolutely. Jeff, anything you want to add to that? Anything you can do to kind of pull up consumer shopping habits so that they shop earlier? I
mean, my world is, we're selling other people's products. That's not a proprietary product like some of my colleagues here. I think that the concern you have to overcome is, if I buy it on October 20th, it's going to be cheaper a month later. So I think customers have been we've trained them well to expect the best prices Black Friday, Cyber Monday into December, and all the data that Ken shared earlier. If we ask people, how likely is it that I could buy it at a better price in December than October? Probably say 100% yes. So will we look at things like guarantee the best price of the season, things like that, to offset that hesitation. So I kind of think Ken's right that people are going to talk about buying earlier, and how much that really happens, who knows. But I mean, the other thing that I said came to mind as I was thinking about this, we're all talking about inventory and having it. There's, unfortunately, a lot of what you hear is that COVID could actually spike up and fall as people go back indoors. We also have to be a little cautious not to be over inventoried, that if things slow down again, so it's really a trade-off of what are we striving for, and how much risk are we willing to take to get there? So yeah. It's a tough one.
It's a tough challenge, and I think some supply chains can be adjusted, but some require more lead time. So it's
also September 23rd. So there's not a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely a holiday like no other. Not to kind of use an overly used phrase, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and someone asked about nuggets earlier. I'm sorry, Emily.
No, all I was going to say is I don't think any of us will be bored this holiday.
Yeah, and actually that's one point, because we know there's a lot of things that are unpredictable. How are you, as you guys are leaders in your organizations, how are you organizing things to make sure that you can make quick decisions and adjust to the things that you don't know at this point? Scott, maybe I'll start with you. How did you kind of set up your operations at Theory Helmut Lang?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Emily alluded to this earlier, that it felt like holiday was pretty much every week. And I think it's mainly being cognizant and learning kind of as we go. And I know that sounds easy, but it was really setting up our operational plan. So the first flash sale, I think we didn't know how that would do in the middle of a pandemic. And I think the other side of the equation with that is having really good, or trying to fine tune our forecasting, because when we talk about our 3PL and our shippers, that's one of the things we noticed that was a little bit self-inflicted. If we underestimated a flash sale or sale cadence, they weren't staffed ahead of time, because keep in mind, they're all practicing these safety protocols and procedures. So I think that's one of the key learnings, is to really make sure we were looking at our data and analytics and consumer behaviors to say, okay, is this a trend? Is this something we can replicate? And then how do we do that at scale, and making sure that the team kind of gets in this cadence of being able to execute it. And one of the things we did is just have stand-up meetings, collaboration, and just foster that conversation, probably a lot more than we would have done. Even if we were in person or virtual, I think just the cadence of communication was increased to make sure that we had that transparency across our cross-functional team, and more importantly with our partners as well. I've never had as many calls with our 3PLs or status in probably throughout my career, but that served us well. And I think you just get into this cadence, and like Emily said, just getting to know them, treat them as human, give them as much information, because no one likes to be surprised.
Yeah. Jeff, Emily, any strategies you want to add to that?
I guess, for me, I go back to clarity, consistency, and over communicating. And what I mean by that is, at least for my team, we're deep. It's the one foot in the current space and another foot in the future. So we're completely fixated on Q4, of course, but I can tell you all 5 strategic initiatives that we have for 2021, every single person in my team could speak to, and within the whole company. So it's pivoting between the short term, because it is crazy to say it's September 23rd. Q4 is both like the marathon meets the triathlon meets the sprint all in one, depending on the day. And I think it's important to keep oscillating between macro and micro, if you will. Where I'm saying consistency is also reminding people to pull them through. It's critical that your team and partners know, as you go through different things in Q4, what are we aiming for in the future too? I think, as said earlier, all of us are doing things, at least I'll speak for myself, that I've never done before. I have the same philosophy, which is I never would have said we won't take a sale because I'm worried we won't, we're hardwired to maximize revenue, do the right thing for consumers, but pulling back feels foreign, and that's the right thing for now. But how do we make sure we can win in the future? So it's communication, clarity, and then being consistent and making sure that everyone on your team, everyone on your partners knows what success looks like, who to reach if things go into a bit of a flux, and move forward.
Awesome. Jeff, anything you want to add to communication?
Yeah, briefly, I'd say, we have 90 days left till Christmas. Inevitably we're human, so we want to come up with new stuff and shiny objects and quick fixes. And for as much as possible, I'm saying no to more things than probably I ever have, just because, infrastructure is stressed. It's a struggle to do our basic job right now. And again, let's just keep focus on doing what we do, executing well, and not screwing up too often.
Awesome. Yep. Keep focused and stay on task. I want to ask a quick question from one of the audience members. Andre Storm asked how your holiday shipping strategy would differ internationally. I don't know if any of you guys ship internationally, if you can speak to that. If not, maybe Matt can jump in on this question. Matt, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, look, here's what I'd say. International shipping, there's 2 types of international shipping, I'd say. Those that rely on the postal network and those that use a premium carrier like a FedEx or a DHL or a UPS. If you're using the postal networks, I think you'd expect the same types of challenges that you're seeing domestically. Most of those postal networks are deferred in some way. They're priced accordingly. I haven't seen as many of the delays on the premium carrier side though. So my sense is there's transit time implications that you probably consider, but to me, that's the only thing I've heard on the international side is the postal centric services. I'm not sure if the other guys have heard different though from their team.
I'd agree. We're not seeing it particularly different than what we're seeing domestically.
So you probably put an earlier cutoff because it has to get internationally. So if it was if your cutoff was the 15th, you might want to pull it up a few days for international.
It depends also where you're clearing, if there's customs, different things that you have to account for. And as our policies as a country do tend to fluctuate a bit, it's also making sure that you are up to speed on those too.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I felt like this could go on forever. And there's just so much rich discussion to be had, but I really appreciate you sharing your time and your insights with this community, especially during such a busy time of year. And for those that are still watching, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks with our holiday summit on October 7th, and we hope you can join us for that. Thank you so much and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.